The Detroit Lions are standing at a very strange crossroads right now, and it's impossible to talk about where this franchise is headed without really digging into what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have built over the last 5 years and what still hasn't been finished. There's no denying how far this team has come under their watch. Back-to-back NFC North titles, hosting and winning a playoff game at Ford Field, snapping a playoff win drought that lasted more than 30 years, reaching the NFC Championship game, and even earning the first seed in the NFC for the first time in franchise history. Those are real accomplishments, and they matter. They are proof that this organization is no longer stuck in the same old Detroit cycle. Because of that progress, both men were rewarded with contract extensions, with Brad Holmes entering his new contract money and Dan Campbell heading into the final year of his original deal. From a big-picture standpoint, ownership clearly believes in the direction of this team. But belief and results are two different conversations, and this is where the tension with the fan base really starts to show. A lot of fans have embraced the idea that Brad Holmes is the greatest general manager this franchise has ever had. That argument comes up constantly, especially when people point to the roster overhaul and the winning seasons. The counterpoint, though, is simple and hard to ignore. The greatest general manager in Detroit Lions history will be the one who delivers a Super Bowl. Not playoff wins, not division titles, not good vibes, a Super Bowl. That's the standard. That's what separates good from legendary. Until that happens, everything else is still part of the climb, not the destination. When you really sit back and look at Brad Holmes' 5-year body of work, patterns start to emerge. Early on, there was a sense of mystery around him. Fans didn't know what he was going to do, how he valued positions, or how aggressive he would be. At first, that mystery was exciting. It felt different, but by the second half of 2023, that mystery started to wear thin. Needs were obvious, especially along the edge and in the trenches, and yet the approach stayed the same. Holding back, trusting internal development, hanging on to his guys. Over time, that philosophy has created both the rise of this team and the ceiling it keeps bumping into. There was a point where even longtime critics had to adjust their focus. Edge rusher used to dominate the conversation, and while that need hasn't disappeared, the offensive line has become just as urgent. Keeping the quarterback upright is not optional in this league. The difference between teams that contend and teams that waste talent often comes down to protection. You can look around the league and see it clearly. When a quarterback stays upright, defenses can carry you deep. When he doesn't, everything collapses. That reality has shifted priorities, even among fans who once wanted nothing but pass rushers. Still, the larger debate around Brad Holmes hasn't gone away, especially when his name is constantly compared to Howie Roseman. That comparison is where emotions really flare. On paper, it isn't close. Howie Roseman is a Super Bowl champion. Brad Holmes is not. That alone changes the conversation. Roseman has proven that his approach works at the highest level, and he has shown a willingness to be ruthless when things don't pan out. If a move fails, he moves on quickly. He doesn't cling to pride or sunk costs. He adapts. He's aggressive. Brad Holmes, by contrast, has shown a tendency to hold on, even when it's clear something isn't working. That stubbornness, driven by belief in his own evaluations, has become one of the biggest criticisms surrounding him. This is why so many fans are frustrated right now. Not because the Lions are bad, but because they're close. Close enough that mistakes hurt more. Close enough that conservative decisions feel louder. The ultimate irony is that if Brad Holmes does manage to take this team all the way, if he and Dan Campbell are the ones who finally bring a Super Bowl to Detroit, they will be immortalized in NFL history. It didn't happen with Barry Sanders.
It didn't happen with Calvin Johnson. It didn't happen with Matthew Stafford while he was here. If it happens now, everything changes forever. And that's the tension hanging over this franchise today. Brad Holmes has won Executive of the Year honors, something fans like to point to as proof of his capability. That award does matter, and it does show respect around the league. It also shows potential, because others who have won it have gone on to win championships. But potential doesn't guarantee follow-through. With limited cap flexibility, fewer premium picks, and contracts lining up, the margin for error is shrinking. The next draft classes and free agency periods are not just about staying competitive. They are about defining his legacy. So here we are, talking about a team that has climbed out of the basement, stood at the top of the division, and tasted playoff success, yet still feels unfinished. The belief is there. The doubt is there too. The clock is ticking, whether people want to admit it or not. The question now isn't whether Brad Holmes can build a good team, because he already has. The question is whether he can take the final step and do what no one before him has done in Detroit. What do you think about where Brad Holmes stands right now and where this franchise is headed from here? That final step is what separates optimism from legacy, and it's why every move Brad Holmes makes from this point forward feels heavier than anything he's done before. The foundation is already in place. This roster didn't accidentally win the division twice. It didn't accidentally host and win a playoff game. Those things happen because there is real talent here and a real culture that Dan Campbell has built. But culture and talent alone don't close the gap when you're talking about Super Bowls. Execution at the highest level does, and that starts with the general manager being willing to evolve when the situation demands it. One of the biggest frustrations among fans is not that Brad Holmes hasn't had successes, but that he often appears unwilling to pivot when something clearly isn't working. There is a difference between patience and stubbornness, and that line has been crossed more than once. Holding on to players because you drafted them, believing that development will eventually catch up, and refusing to cut bait can quietly drain a roster. The league doesn't wait for you to be right. The league punishes hesitation. Other front offices move fast, take risks, and accept that some decisions will fail. The key is not avoiding failure, but minimizing how long failure stays on your roster. That's why the comparison to Howie Roseman keeps coming back. It's not just about Super Bowl rings. It's about mindset. Roseman has shown that you can build for now and for the future at the same time. He's been transparent about it. He's aggressive about it. He doesn't talk down to the fan base or hide behind vague explanations. When something doesn't work, it's addressed. When a window is open, he attacks it. That philosophy has produced championships, and championships are the only currency that truly matters at this level. For Brad Holmes, time is no longer an abstract concept. Contract timelines matter. Cap space matters. Draft capital matters. The longer issues go unaddressed, the harder they become to fix. There have been opportunities in past drafts and off-seasons to be more aggressive at premium positions, and those moments can't be undone. What matters now is whether he recognizes that the approach that got the Lions here may not be the same approach that gets them over the top. Growth as a general manager isn't just about finding talent. It's about learning when your own tendencies are limiting the team. There is still hope, and that hope isn't blind. Brad Holmes has shown he can identify high-level players. He has shown he can build a competitive roster. He has won league-wide recognition for his work. Those things don't happen by accident. The concern is whether his ego will allow him to adjust when the stakes are highest, because the margin for error is shrinking, and patience from the fan base is wearing thin. This city has waited too long to settle for almost. If the Lions take the next step, if they reach another NFC championship game or finally break through to the Super Bowl, everything about this conversation changes. Extensions become easy. Trust is restored. Doubt disappears. But if they fall short again, especially due to the same recurring weaknesses, the pressure will be impossible to ignore. At that point, the question won't just be about roster holes or draft picks. It will be about whether Brad Holmes is truly capable of being the aggressive, adaptive leader this moment demands. That's where this story is headed. Not toward a rebuild, not toward despair, but toward a defining moment. The Lions are close enough that every decision feels like it could tip the scale one way or the other. What makes this moment even more intense is that the Lions are no longer operating from a position of innocence. This isn't a young rebuilding team learning how to win. This is a team that knows what January football feels like, knows what it's like to host playoff games, and knows what it's like to be one step away from the Super Bowl and watch it slip away. That knowledge changes expectations inside the building and in the fan base. Mistakes that were once tolerated as part of growth now feel like missed opportunities that may not come back around. The truth is, windows in the NFL are fragile. They don't announce when they're closing. They just slowly tighten until one day you realize you're on the outside looking in. Contracts get heavier. Draft picks become fewer. Opponents adjust. What worked yesterday doesn't automatically work tomorrow. That's why adaptability is so important at this stage. This roster needs finishing touches, not patient speeches. It needs decisive action, not explanations about long-term vision while the present slips through your fingers. Brad Holmes has to show that he understands this moment, not by talking about it, but by acting on it. The next draft, the next free agency period, and the next set of roster decisions will tell us everything we need to know about whether he's willing to change his approach. This isn't about abandoning his philosophy entirely. It's about knowing when to bend it, knowing when to push chips in, knowing when good enough is no longer enough. For For fans, the frustration doesn't come from hatred or lack of appreciation. It comes from belief. People wouldn't be this vocal if they didn't think this team was capable of more. Detroit has seen talent before. What it hasn't seen is a front office and coaching staff this close to doing something historic. That's why every conservative move feels amplified. That's why every comparison to championship-winning organizations stings. Because the gap feels bridgeable, not impossible. The reality is simple. Brad Holmes still controls his own narrative. If he evolves, if he becomes more aggressive when the situation demands it, and if those moves translate into postseason success, the doubts fade fast. History is forgiving when you win. But if the same issues resurface again, if the same roster weaknesses remain unaddressed, the conversation will only get louder. At that point, no award, no past success, and no explanation will quiet it. This is the defining chapter of the Brad Holmes era. Not the rebuild, not the turnaround. The moment where a good general manager either becomes great or stays stuck just short of it. The Lions are right there, and the margin between banners and regret has never been thinner. There's also something important that can't be ignored in all of this, and that's ownership. Sheila Hamp made it clear that expectations have changed. This is no longer about moral victories or steady improvement. This is about responsibility. When you reach a certain level, it becomes incumbent on the general manager and the head coach to deliver the ultimate result. That message matters because it sets the tone for how much patience still exists. Extensions are not automatic anymore. Trust has to be reaffirmed with results. Brad Holmes is entering the phase of his tenure where excuses disappear. Early rebuild years come with cover. Developmental drafts come with cover. But once you've won the division twice, once you've hosted playoff games, once you've been that close, the standard is no longer progress, it's payoff. That's where the pressure becomes real. Every decision now is evaluated not on intent, but on impact. Not on vision, but on outcomes. What complicates things further is that the Lions don't have unlimited flexibility moving forward. Cap space is tighter than people want to admit. Premium draft picks are not endless. That means mistakes are more costly now than they were 2 or 3 years ago. You can't afford to miss repeatedly at premium positions. You can't afford to wait too long for development that may never come. And you can't afford to ignore obvious needs while hoping internal answers magically appear. This is why so many fans feel like the clock is ticking louder than ever. It's not panic, it's awareness. Awareness that this roster, as good as it is, still has holes that become glaring in January. Awareness that other contenders are not standing still. Awareness that the league doesn't care how close you were last year. Every season resets the table, and reputation buys you nothing when the ball is kicked off. Brad Holmes still has the opportunity to flip the entire narrative. One aggressive offseason, one draft that directly addresses the biggest weaknesses, one postseason run where those moves clearly make the difference. That's all it takes. The line between criticism and praise in this league is razor thin. Fans are not asking for perfection. They're asking for urgency that matches the moment. Because this city knows what almost feels like. It knows what wasted greatness looks like. And that's why the frustration sounds the way it does right now. It's not coming from a place of hopelessness. It's coming from a place of expectation. The Lions are expected to contend. They are expected to threaten for a Super Bowl. And that expectation changes everything. So as this next chapter unfolds, every move will be magnified. Every draft pick will be dissected. Every free agent decision will be questioned. Not because fans want to tear things down, but because they believe the foundation is strong enough to support something historic. The only question left is whether Brad Holmes is willing to take the final risks required to finish the job. What makes this stretch so uncomfortable is that it forces everyone to confront a hard truth about the NFL. Being close can be more painful than being bad. When you're rebuilding, losses make sense. When you're mediocre, expectations are low. But when you're right there, when you've proven you can win in January, every flaw feels magnified. Every conservative decision feels like a wasted opportunity. That's exactly where the Lions are right now. This roster has enough talent to compete with anyone on a given Sunday, but Super Bowls aren't won on given Sundays. They're won by stacking advantages, by eliminating weaknesses, and by refusing to let obvious problems linger year after year. That's why the conversation around Brad Holmes has shifted so dramatically. It's no longer about whether he's competent. It's about whether he's decisive enough when decisiveness is required. The league doesn't reward loyalty to ideas. It rewards adaptability. The teams that win championships are the ones that recognize when their original plan needs adjustment. They don't panic, but they also don't stay frozen. They evolve. They become more aggressive when the window opens, not less. And the Lions' window is open right now, even if it isn't wide open forever. Fans see it, opponents see it, The only question is whether the front office fully embraces it. There's still time to change the story. There's still time for Brad Holmes to prove that he can do more than build a strong foundation, that he can actually finish the structure. But time is no longer abundant. Each offseason carries more weight than the last. Each missed chance tightens the window a little more. That's why this moment feels so defining. Not dramatic, not fatalistic, just real. The Lions have climbed too high to pretend the summit doesn't matter. Everything from here on out is judged by one standard and one standard only. And the hardest part for this organization is that there are no more comfortable places to hide. The